Okay, I'm gonna start talking about U.S. income distribution and inequality. And I'm gonna start from explaining Lorenz curve, which is a very useful model that um, illustrates the inequality and income distributions. And let's start with the definition. So Lorenz curve is a line used to portray an income distribution, drawn on a graph with percentiles of households on the horizontal axis and the cumulative percentage of income on the vertical axis. So let's actually draw this here. Um, it's very useful. So we get we put this, and on the horizontal axis we put cumulative percentage population or household or percentile household, and here we have cumulative um, percentage income. And let's say this is US economy, and we have equality line here, and we're gonna have Lorenz curve somewhere here. So this is equality curve. Um, it is 45 degrees curve, and what Lorenz curve tells us is that, let's say this would be 50% of the income, 100% of the income in the U.S. This is 50% of population and 100% of the population. So the bottom 50% earns less than 20. I guess this is like 15, 15% of the entire income in the US. So it is unequal. And if any economy is actually operating at this equality curve, what this means is that bottom 50% earns 50% of the income. And in fact, 10%, bottom 10% earns 10% of the income. Top 10% earns 10% of the income. So everyone actually earns exact same amount of money in theoretically, but that is obviously not possible in any economy. There's always rich people and poor people, and if there's rich people and poor people, if there's people who are earning different level of income, the Lorenz curve would exist away from equality curve. And if the area between equality curve and the Lorenz curve is big, that means inequality is bigger, and we can easily tell this by drawing something like this. In this case, bottom 50% only earns probably around 5% of the entire income in the society or in the economy. And in other words, we can also explain this as top top 10%, let's say, earns more than half, even around I would say 60% or 70% of the entire income. Top 10%, okay? The richest 10% of the US or the population in that economy earns this much money. So this is Lorenz curve, and we also have Gini coefficient, which is very important concept. It's related to Lorenz curve. It's a measure of inequality based on the Lorenz curve that goes from 0, which is perfect equality, to 1, which is complete inequality. As I explained, if the area between here and here, equality curve and Lorenz curve is big, that means the income is more unevenly distributed. So the Gini coefficient would be area A, which would be here, uh, and we would have area B, so A divided by A plus B. That's Gini coefficient. So if the area between equality curve and Lorenz curve is big, the Gini coefficient would be big. And let's actually uh, use this to understand what is happening to the inequality in the United States of America. And I've got a lot of these data and ideas from the textbook, Macroeconomics in Context, written by those, number of economists and authors. Yes, we have very interesting graph here. This actually shows Gini coefficient over time, how it changed over time. It's from 1968 to 2020. So it started with somewhere around less than 0.4, and now it is closer to 0.5, meaning that this area A, is almost half of this entire triangle, uh, showing significant inequality. So inequality has been rising. And we have this other data that shows change in income. I assume this is percentage change in the income for bottom 90%. and for 10%. Okay, so how is the income changing for bottom 90%, which probably represent poor people, middle class, somewhat wealthy people, and top 10%, which is the wealthiest population. For the wealthiest population, it's dark blue. The percentage change in the income is getting bigger and bigger. Their income is rising way faster than poor people recently, but it used to be different before. It used to be that their income growth wasn't as high as the percentage increase in the income for bottom 90%. So this is another way to show inequality. Rich people are getting more and more richer at a faster rate than poor people or middle class. We also have this another data that shows annual income growth rate. Okay, annual growth rate means like in 1 year. Okay, for example, from 1990 to 1991, how much percentage of income has how much has income increased in terms of percentage? What's the percentage increase in the income, right? From 1946 to 1980, every year the income rose around by 1.5%, I would say, almost for any population, whether you're bottom 10% or bottom 20% or middle class, lower class, or uh, somewhat like people who are earning quite a lot of money, their income increased at the same rate annually in this period. But if you look at 1980 to 2018, the increase in income is more rapid, right? Higher for people who are rich. Rich people saw their income rising quite rapidly compared to more rapidly than poor people. And some poor people experience their income actually falling, because you can tell this because it's below zero. If it's below zero, that means it is negative increase. Negative increase means it's decrease. Their income has decreased by a bit for poorest population. For middle class, it's better than poor people. For rich people, they saw their income increasing way faster. And for the, like, I would say this is top 1%, top 2%, so their income rising extremely rapidly, more rapidly than any other population. Okay, they experience their income rising by like 5% every year annually in this period. So it used to be that income was growing for the at the same rate for almost any population, but now it is favoring rich, which is the reality in the U.S. economy. And in fact, a lot of industrialized nations are experiencing rising inequality, rising income inequality. So it's not a phenomenon unique to the U.S., I would say. And income inequality in the U.S. has been rising in the past 60 years. And income share means like how much percentage of income are you uh, earning in the economy, right? Income share, the wealthy population is increasing, but income share of bottom 50% declined from 21% to 11.5%. So the income share for poor is decreasing, income share of rich is increasing. What it doesn't mean is that it's not that poor people are getting less and less money. Well, some people are, but overall, it's not like middle class and poor, lower class are uh, experiencing income shrink or anything. Their income are probably rising for most of the populations. However, it is the income share, like what percentage are they earning out of all the income earned in the economy of the United States, that is decreasing. So inequality is rising. So why is inequality rising? We have so many different explanations. There's no clear consensus, and I would argue that there's no single explanation, and a lot of people would agree with me. Like that's the case for most of the economic debate. Like we don't have a consensus, and it is often because there are various reasons why such things happen, such phenomena happens. So I'm gonna introduce a few of them. This is not, I would say, this is not like there should be other factors. Uh, I've listed like four, but just note that they are not, how would you say, exhaustive. Uh, so first of all, skill bias technical change may explain why income distribution is changing or becoming more uneven. So relative wage gains will be the greatest for those workers who possess the education and skills to use modern technology. So we all know that technologies are developing quite rapidly in the past decades, or in the past 100 years, in the past century, in the past half century. We have smartphones, we have computers, we have other technological devices, technologies, uh, things like that. And those people who know how to manage them, how to adopt them in their work life, can increase their productivity quite rapidly, which is not surprising. If they can use computers, they're it's going to be more efficient. They're gonna be able to uh, contribute to the production way more than people who don't know how to use this. So they can see their income rising. They can pressure firms to pay more because they are more productive. They are more valuable workers. However, it is minority. It is always minority who can effectively use technology and adapt it in their work lives, in the office or in their, yeah, workplace. So skilled workers, or minority of the workforce, obtain wage gains by adopting computers and other digital technology. So that can be one of the reasons, right? Some laborers are effectively adopting technology, so their income rises. Majority do not see that happening. Decline in unions. This is a very a lot of people argue that decline in unions explain uh, why income inequality is rising. And in fact, there is data that suggests that there is negative correlation between union membership and uh, inequality, right? Like Gini coefficient. So union membership declined from 25% in 1950s to 11% today in the US. So strong union may force firms to keep up their wages with increasing value of their output. We all know that laborers are becoming more productive. A lot of data suggests that labor productivity, which can be often calculated with formula, which is total output, which is GDP in the economy, divided by total hours worked. Each hour, labor is producing more goods and services in the economy. Therefore, it would be fair that their income rise along with it. However, if there's no strong unions, uh, firms can just keep their wages low, right, rather than rising, because firms want to increase their profit. But if there's union that actually threaten them, pressure them, uh, to ri- to raise it, that could happen, and that used to happen maybe. However, union membership is very low right now, so it doesn't. That's not the case. So that's very interesting explanation. And then next one is actually my favorite: increasing capital income in the U.S. economy, or financialization of the U.S. economy, may explain why inequality is rising. So what is capital income? We need to know what capital income is. Capital income is income that you gain by owning, for example, land, housing, stocks, businesses, bonds, and things like that. So you have ownership of capitals, right? When you own houses or lands or stock, that means you have partial, especially for stocks. That means you're partially owning the business, and when that's the case, you can get profits. Profits is example of capital income. Uh, it is different. It is distinct from labor income, which is the income that you get by providing labor, by working, right? You work and you get wages and salaries. That is labor income. Capital income is not wages nor salaries. It is profits. It is rents that you get by letting other people use your houses or buildings or land. Um, it's it's interest that you can get by having bonds. So capital income comes by uh, from ownership of capitals. And what happens is that U.S. economies, a lot of data suggests that U.S. economy is becoming more and more financialized. So the industries such as like banks, investment firms, and stock markets, they are rising. Um, they are becoming um, more significant part of U.S. GDP, U.S. Production. So a lot of people are earning from these sectors, and they tend to see their income significantly rising because capital income tend to rise faster than labor income. And I'm gonna explain more about this. And also, the ownership of financial asset is concentrated to the rich, right? A lot of people have stocks. However, it is evident that rich people are the one who are dominating, for example, stocks or the ownership of capital. Top 10% of the U.S. economy, top 10% of the U.S. population hold 89% of the entire stocks. So I want to explain more about why capital income actually raise inequality. Why does it grow faster than labor income? And it's gonna intuitively make sense. So capital ownership does not face limit that favor labor's face. Land, housing, stocks, business bonds do not face the limit that labor face, which is the limited time or other things. So imagine your labors. You wanna increase your labor income. You need to be productive. You need to be more efficient. You want to be more valuable labor so firms can pay you more. But there is a limit to that. You can only work so much, and you can increase your productivity only so much, right? Uh, you have 24 hours every day. You have to sleep like 7 hours of it. Uh, so there's limits on how much how much time you can spend on labors working. Uh, well, someone can say you can learn, you can reskill, you can learn about how to use technology, things like that. That is true. However, there is limits to that. You can only increase your productivity so much by studying and learning new things. You're not gonna be 5 times more productive tomorrow or next year just by reading a lot of books, right? Um, Maybe some people can experience that, but average people can't. However, in contrast to that, capital ownership is different. Capital income is different. You can own capital, you can own stocks, and you can get some money from it. And it is you can use that money to buy another stocks. You can expand it uh, indefinitely. There is very little limits to it. You get money and you buy another stock. You get more money, so maybe you may buy some bonds. You get more money from it, so you can buy land. Your capital ownership can expand. Therefore, the capital income rise, and there's no they do generate those income just by existing, right? The existence of bond, the fact that you're owning the bond generate the money, not the fact that you're working for it. You're not selling your labor. You're not going around and like do physical labor or do anything like that. It's just sitting there in your uh, you're just owning it, and it generates capital income. So they're limitless, right? That's why capital income tend to rise faster, faster and faster, and that is happening. So that's why inequality is rising, especially in a normal economy. In an abnormal economy where, for example, war happens, your country's invaded, your factories are destroyed. In that case, yes, you can actually lose capital income. Your capital income might fall, or capital ownership itself might be threatened, because for example, when you buy stocks, when you have partial ownership of business, you're partially owning, for example, the factories that is running and generating a lot of profits. You can get part of profit as dividend. That is that capital income. However, if that is destroyed by foreign invaders, obviously you're gonna lose a lot of your wealth from it. And in that case, yes, inequality can um, fall. And in fact, in World War I, or when disaster happened, inequality actually fell in the history of the U.S. or Western economies. However, in a normal economy, that's not the case. Capital income tend to rise and keep rising, and you can use that gain to buy to expand your capital ownership. There, it's limitless. So that is what's happening. Inequality is rising because of that, and we have this evidence here. So wages and salaries are growing, used to grow around 4%, which is quite high, but now it is not growing at all. It's near 0%. However, corporate profits, which is a part of capital income, right? The profit that firms gain, and they're probably going to divide it and distribute it to uh, those who own the business, which is stockholders. That is rising. That is rising Uh, it's like 5% increase from 2000 to 2007. So it's a significant difference. Significant difference. So capital income is surging, labor income is facing the limit. And final explanation is tax cuts that have been conducted in the U.S. Uh, history in the past like 50 years, I would say. So we have a very famous president, Ronald Reagan. He actually did tax cut, very significant tax cut, and he cut marginal tax rates for upper income brackets. So he basically reduced the income tax for those who are earning a lot of money. And corporate tax rates, estate and inheritance taxes, and capital gain taxes rates, they all declined in during his administration. He cut all these taxes, and it's easy to tell that the these are the taxes that are imposed, typically imposed for rich population, inheritance taxes. Rich people tend to come from rich family. They inherit a lot of money, and capital gains. I don't even need to explain that capital gain is like profits, rents, those income that rich people get. Corporate tax, self-evident. So he basically cut tax for rich people, and obviously that would, by definition, uh, increase the inequality in terms of Lorenz curve. It is obvious, right? U.S. economy had Lorenz curve here, but it's gonna expand like this. So that's what happened during his administration, but it didn't only happen during Reagan's administration. President Bush, who was elected in 2000, he also conducted a large tax cut, which reduced income tax for almost everyone. However, the largest share of the tax cut went to the rich. So the rich people experienced way more significant portion of their tax being uh, eliminated uh, compared to poor people. So that also increased Gini coefficient. Trump tax cuts. President Trump, who was elected in 2016 and who became president in 2017, did also sign a tax cut bills that reduced corporate taxes from 35% to 21%. And yeah, corporate tax is tax on profits, so it's for rich people. So rich people were able to retain more of their money. And that explains why Gini coefficient has been rising, why inequality has been rising in the U.S. But there is another explanation, which is related to tax, which is payroll tax. Payroll tax is tax that funds Social Security and Medicare in the U.S. It's very important, and they increased from 2% to 6%, and now it is 15.3%. And why is it a problem? Why is it a problem that payroll tax is increasing? It is problem because payroll tax is regressive, meaning that poor people or middle class uh, pay larger portion of their income as payroll tax compared to rich people. Rich people only pay very little portion of their income and handed in as payroll tax to the government. However, poor people uh, give so much of their income, right? Yeah, that's what happens, and I'm gonna explain more in detail. So the reason why it's regressive is that uh, it's because it is capped at the income of $184,500. So anyone who earns more than this, the additional income that you get after $184,500 would not be taxed. Okay, so if you earn, let's say, $284,500, only $184,500 of that income will be taxed at the rate of 15.3%. Therefore, that person has additional income of $100,000, right? That is not taxed. That is neglected. 0% tax on that. There is income tax, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about payroll tax. So what happens as a result of this is that it is flat for large population. So poor people pays same amount of their income and handed into the government as middle class people who are earning a bit less than this, right? Which is which seems unfair because poor people, yeah, like there is this argument that poor people should be paying less portion of their income because They have to be they need that money to survive, right? Yes, and that is flat. Flat rate is could be fair, but not only it is flat, especially for people who are rich, they are paying less percentage of their income as payroll tax. So let's say, um, I don't know, the billionaires in the U.S. Uh, only I would say very few percent, like 1 or 2% of their income is, or less than that. I would say like less than 1%. I haven't calculated, so I'm not sure. That percent, less than 1 percentage of their income is handed in as payroll tax, and I can actually calculate what's the maximum amount of payroll tax that any rich people would ever pay. So I just need to multiply 184,500 with 0.153, 0.153, which would be $28,228. Okay, this is this is what, for example, Elon Musk is paying. This is what billionaires are paying, and it is same as and people who are earning $184,500 are also paying this much. So that's how regressive it is. Anyone who earns more than 100 would pay less and less portion of the income as payroll tax. So as a result of this, we have this very interesting graph that shows effective tax rates, average tax rates by income group. So I think this represent bottom 10% of population. Okay, bottom 10% of the population is paying in 2018, or okay, let's say 2018. They're paying almost same portion of their income as uh, taxes to the government. They're paying same rate of their income as taxes as people who are middle class or who are quite rich. And actually, the billionaires or the top 1% or 5% or somewhere around that are paying less portion of their income as taxes. And it is mainly because of payroll tax. Because other taxes are actually progressive, meaning that rich people pays higher share of their income as taxes. For example, income tax. Okay, if you're poor, you only need to pay a very small percentage of your income as uh, income tax, and if you're rich, you have to be paying quite a lot of high percentage of your income as income tax. And same as corporate taxes, I would say corporate taxes is tax for rich people, and uh, poor people don't pay corporate tax because they're not running businesses. Uh, yeah, that's the case for a lot of taxes. However, payroll tax is regressive. That's what makes this. But it's not only payroll tax. We also have sales tax, which is very, very regressive. If in Vermont we had to pay like 6% uh, sales tax. So no matter whether you're no matter if you're rich or poor, you have to be paying that. And in fact, poor people are actually spending uh, larger portion of their income on uh, things that they need to buy. They can't really save, and they are paying sales tax too. So compared to rich people, they are basically paying larger share of their income as sales tax. So that's what makes this regressive too. So yeah, as I said, they're those four explanations are not the only reasons why inequality rising. You can explain from different perspectives too, but I think those are very important ones, and I got these ideas from macroeconomics in context uh, by those authors, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.